Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Dr. Vanessa M. Brown. I'm your moderator and host for the evening, and we are excited about this show tonight. This is Trump's America. That's what we're going to be talking about. We're so glad that you're here. We want to thank our Facebook Live audience that's coming in the room already, as well as our YouTube audience, people that are on the Beyond the Gatekeepers page as well. We are happy to have you here. We ask you to continue to share and like this programming that we are presenting to you tonight. Make sure you share with friends and family and those that you feel need to hear what our conversation is going to be about on tonight. I want to bring not a guest, but she helps me move this program right along. It is because of her brilliant mind that we are here, in the person of our presiding prelate, Bishop Yvette Adrian Flunder. She is the presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and also the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. Bishop, will you come and greet the people, tell them more about Beyond the Gatekeepers as well as about tonight's show?
So good evening, everyone. We are so glad, always so glad to have you as part of our conversation. We have a great many things to talk about because we are seeing some parallels in the United States and other parts of the world. We have some folks with us that will spend some time sharing their realities as we are talking about power, the absence of it, the presence of it, the intent to have it, what it means for us in the United States as it relates to our experience with our former president, as it relates to the inability for action by those persons who feel that they have lost or will lose if they do not support this president. But these parallels are the same in many, many, many settings. We're going to talk about this and start trying to figure out what is our theopolitical response to this reality. How should we be not only talking to ourselves, but those that we have some ability to influence? As someone said today very clearly, that the greatest mistake that was made in this election was to let and encourage so many Black people to vote. We need to talk a little bit about that tonight. God bless you, and I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder. Our next guest is, of course, is not a guest as well. He is one of the brilliant minds that's behind this show. We are excited that he is always giving his time to us in the person of Bishop Carlton D. Pearson, an author, progressive spiritual teacher, and thought leader. Bishop, will you come and greet the people as well? You're muted, Bishop.
People have been trying to mute me for years, and I muted myself that time. If you can't beat them, join them, I guess. We're talking about Trump's America, but this is really not so much Trump's America. It's the people who put him in office's America, and they want to keep it their America. You saw the hideous display of violence and violation, aggression, anger, ferocity, vitriol on January 6th. That group, this is their country. That's their claim. That's their declaration. This is ours, and we're not going to give it to anybody else, and we don't even want to share it with anybody except those we decide to share it with. So we'll build walls, we'll kick doors down, we'll use our guns, we'll use our faith, our prayers, our flag, our nationalistic, elitist, supremacist, inferiority complex, victim consciousness, all that's mixed together in the emotions that made a perfect storm. And it's still brewing. These people are not finished. And so Trump's not completely out of the way, but he has lost a great deal of his delegated power, his designated power. Now he is a commoner like us in certain ways, but that group who support him, over 70 million Americans, most of whom still support him, are really what we need to talk about: where they live, where they think, how long they've been in that posture, and will we be able to break the back of that mentality? They're not attacking those people, but their opinions are threatening to our democracy, and they are a course of domestic terrorism, an example of that, and of they threatened the security of the country. So that's my greatest concern tonight, and we need to really look that right in face. Most of that is the church, the white evangelical church, or people who have a faith-based initiative, a faith-based mentality in God and Jesus, and they think they're doing what God wants them to do. So we need to rethink God, and rethink good, and rethink best, and rethink Bible, and then we'll have something to build on. So I'm eager to see this happen tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bishop. And our next guest is Bishop Joseph W. Tolton. He is my brother and friend. He is the Executive Director of Interconnected Justice and TFAM Global. Bishop Tolton, come on and greet the people, please.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Vanessa Brown, my absolute dear sister, my heart. And I just, of course, want to bless God for being in the presence of my pastor on the national level, Bishop Flunder, and certainly to Bishop Pearson. So good to be with you. In the context of the way in which I serve the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, of course, it connects me to countries around the world, and in particular in East Africa. And I know what it is to spend a significant part of my life in a part of the world where you are living under the reign of a dictator. And you feel that in your body, you feel it in your spirit, and you are, even as a regular visitor, even as a visitor, you're governed by it. There are cues that you cannot miss. The picture of dear leader is everywhere, so that you are reminded of their symbol and their iconic image. And so I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation, and hope that I can lend the experience that I have to embellish what it is we want to accomplish tonight.
Thank you so much, Bishop. I appreciate that. Our next guest is in the person of Joanita Warry Ssenfuka, and she is the Executive Director of Freedom in Rome, Uganda. We're going to call her Biggie for tonight, because that is the name that she goes by. Biggie, if you can hear us, please greet the people. If you cannot hear us, then I'm going to read your bio. And then there is a delay because Biggie is in Uganda. We can't.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I can hear you, but it's a little bit breaking. I am using internet, but with VPN, because our internet was shut down. I don't know whether you can hear me very well, because just a few seconds back, electricity just went off. But now I have tried to get some light to enable everyone see me, but hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Do me a favor and tell the people what you're doing in Uganda. Tell them about your work.
She didn't hear you.
Biggie, tell us about your work in Uganda.
I am the Executive Director of Freedom and Rome Uganda. Freedom and Rome Uganda. Freedom and Rome. Yes, please. I am working with Freedom and Rome Uganda as the Executive Director, but I also I am the chairperson of the LGBT Catholic group in Uganda. And yeah, I work with Freedom and Rome, which is exclusively lesbian, bisexual, and queer persons in Uganda. I'm also a board member of I'm on the board of Sexual Minorities Uganda. Yeah.
Thank you. And our final guest tonight is in the person of Julie Dorff. She is the Senior Advisor and Counsel for Global Equality. Julie, will you greet the people of Beyond the Gatekeepers and abroad and let them know what kind of work you're doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show tonight. It's an honor and a privilege. The Council for Global Equality is a advocacy coalition in Washington, D.C. that the Fellowship Global, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries Global portion is a member, a very proud member. And we focus on all of the U.S. government foreign affairs agencies to ensure that they are truly inclusive of the human rights of lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people. We're all recovering from the last 4 years in one way or another. And I think while we're very much focused on the new administration and changing policy, I think there's still a lot to unpack about what we just lived through and what we are needing to reconcile with as an American people.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm glad that you're here with us. And thank you to all of the panelists in advance. We're glad that you're here. Again, to our Facebook Live audience and to our YouTube audience, we are glad that you are with us, and we ask you to continue to like and share the page. And so I want to ask for the first question, as we have named this Trump's America. And when we talk about the reason I think that we came up with that name, simply because we know that Russia, Uganda, and places like that have dictatorship in their countries. And it seemed as if Donald Trump had been moving our country in that direction, right? Becoming very fascist, so many different things. And as Bishop Pearson said, over 70 million people did vote for him. And so there is a great divide in almost two Americas here, right here in the United States. And so I want to talk a little bit about the parallels and the comparisons that we can make to Russia and Uganda if we can. I'm going to start with Bishop Flunder.
Well, I think that we are experiencing the effects and after effects of a despot. There are many things that are parallel to the ways in which Hitler came to power. For those who think it's impossible to ever happen again, he lost an election, as you know, but there was such a groundswell among the people that pushed for him until they depleted the power of the forces that won when he lost, depleted it such that he was able to move in an authoritarian position to save the day. And that's not an unusual thing. I've seen it on the macro scale and the micro scale. I've seen it in local congregations, frankly, and organizations where someone who was determined to win didn't win, and they didn't leave. They would undermine the other organization that won in that place and gather the people to them by making false accusations. The entire false accusation of a rigged election, the whole thing was a lie from the very beginning. But the process about the rigged election happened before Donald Trump left office. He was already talking about what was wrong with mail-in votes. He was already talking about what was wrong with election officials. He was already preparing the people for the fact that there was a groundswell of people of color. There were a bunch of them that he said were illegal immigrants. He was preparing the folks for a rigged election. And then when you add to that all sorts of different kinds of spirituality, whether it is indigenous faith or ultra conservative faith or faith that is informed by fear. And I have said a few times that it's very much like the Jim Jones Kool-Aid. You find the people who are the most distressed and upset and frustrated, and you connect them to the moneyed people, and you have the ability to create the perfect storm. And so it has happened. It has happened in Uganda. It has happened historically in the world. And now Putin, who was in many ways the orchestrator, in many ways the person who helped Donald Trump to come to this place in our nation is finding that his people have been watching our people. And all of a sudden, they have taken to the street against their own leader, basically, and in favor of the man he tried to kill, who didn't die, and came back to town of his own volition. And the streets are filled. We don't have any concept of the numbers in terms of what just happened at the Capitol that they are experiencing in Russia everywhere. They've already arrested over 3,000 people, and the people just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. So this, I'm only saying that this is a reoccurrence, and it is international and historical. The question is, how are we going to, in our, again, theopolitical analysis and our advocacy, how are we going to speak into this atmosphere in the United States and world so that we don't have to just experience this over and over and over? What will be the words to say? To whom should we be saying them, and who should be on the front of this reality? That is what is in my heart tonight. More questions than answers, by the way.
Yes, ma'am. Bishop Tolton.
Thank you. That was just so beautifully said and well framed by Bishop Flunder. And of course, it's not by accident that today is the day of remembrance for the Holocaust. And Bishop spoke well to the ways in which Hitler came to power. And, you know, in the American kind of political and social lexicon, we don't really have a point of reference for really understanding fascism. And so when you speak to the fact that we have been on this slow drip road to fascism, for most people, they just don't have a way to really understand what that really means. They think that you're creating something that is, you know, kind of fantastic, or, you know, puts us, you know, into the twilight zone. But that is a very grounded and real analysis, because that is, in fact, what Trump has done. And so just really briefly, you know, Masha Gessen has talked a lot about the road to autocracy. There's the autocratic attempt, the autocratic breakthrough, and the autocratic consolidation. And we were very much so on the precipice between the attempt, the breakthrough, but between the breakthrough and the consolidation, to be very clear. And going into his second term, God forbid that it happened, I think we would have really been at the point of autocratic consolidation. But briefly, in terms of like looking at what the president did that led us to this road, as Bishop spoke to, you have to build a base, and you do it by declaring their isolation from the rest of the population. So he put the MAGA base on a social and political island and reminded them of their grievances, of which only he could deliver them from. So then he anointed himself as their iconic leader. And he found two constituencies: white working class people who believe that they are that they have been pushed out of the economic American dream because of brown people and because of black people, when in fact it is technology and globalization that are the real enemy. But our president, the former president, gave them the enemy being China, Mexico, other brown immigrants, and of course, black people. And then he spoke to the religious right, who for many years have seen themselves as unfairly demonized and attacked, and who see themselves as losing the culture war. And he stitched those two constituencies together with the typical country club Republican, who of course has the money. And as Bishop said, that created the formula for the perfect storm. He also demonized the media so that he could discredit them, and now he himself becomes the source of truth. He put his family in place so that he was well insulated and had spies within his own inner circle. He politicized the Justice Department, blurring the line between the rule of law and the presidency. Of course, he was the king of fear-mongering. He politicized the civil services and the military and the National Guard, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of these elements were in the soup that is the road to autocracy.
Thank you so much, Bishop Tolton. Julie?
Yeah, that was all so well said. Well, one thing I just wanted to start with is in terms of required reading. I think, I don't know if this is in the, Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny is just, after the 1619 Project, I think those two things should be the required reading of every American citizen. But it's really, really helpful to, like Masha Gessen, to really identify what leads to autocracy. And this country was, 2 weeks ago in the Capitol, we were this close to losing our democracy. And that should be chilled to the bone still from that event, and actually from the last election. The fact that 74 million people after those 4 years voted for him. He had more voters in this last election than the one before. And we need, it was Trump, but it's Trumpism, and it's the American people who were gullible to his mass, marketing scheme, and duping. From the beginning of the last administration, I had a very unpopular opinion that I said I would take President Pence over President Trump any day. And in the LGBT community, that's people really didn't like what he stood for in terms of his social values. Understandably, I certainly abhor him, but he wouldn't have separated us from truth. Like, we would have had different opinions. We would have had radically different policies. We would have had lots to be opposed to. But I don't think this deep damage to our hold on facts and truth and distorted realities, believing that the perception is truth, believing in conspiracy theories. This moment that we're still in, the legacy of Trump, has got to be faced head on and with clear-eyed, sober truth-telling. Speaking truth to power has never been more resonant than ever. And I have lots more to say, but I think I was naive at the beginning about how bad this was. Masha Gessen's actually a good friend. She came to my house one night very early in this administration, and she said so clearly, like, take his word seriously. Like, do not let yourself believe. And I gotta say, I didn't think it would ever have gotten as bad as it did, and that that our democratic institutions are so vulnerable, and that quickly. Thankfully, a week ago, we saw a beautiful inauguration. Right in that same spot. Thankfully, we have turned a page, but we have a lot of work left to do.
Thank you so much, Julie. Bishop Pearson?
Interesting that the position of those who are supportive of Donald Trump in general has not changed through anything he's done. From the statement, I could take a 45, shoot somebody down on Fifth Avenue and still not lose my support. How he knew that is beyond me, except he's done a lot of studying. He may be the dumbest smart man we've ever had to manipulate a country, this one in particular. Karl Marx is the one who said, religion is the opiate of the people. Vladimir Lenin believed that, and of course, Vladimir Putin believes it, as I've said repeatedly on this program. And they knew what crowd to go for to unseat democracy, finding the weaknesses of racism, elitism, bigotry, white supremacy, the white privilege, the superiority, we're the chosen people. That Putin studied all that stuff for years and planned to get, there's about 620 million evangelicals worldwide. Most of them live here in the United States. And evangelicals wrestle with victim consciousness, that the world's against us, Jesus is coming back, the Antichrist spirit, the end-time false prophet, the mark of the beast, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of superstition, a lot of fairy tale, a lot of fear, a lot of paranoia. The term fascism was first used of the totalitarian right-wing nationalist regime of Mussolini. Most of us know what a violent man he was, what hideous things he did to other human beings. The regimes of the Nazis in Germany and Franco in Spain were also fascist. And fascism tends to include a belief in the supremacy of one ethnic group, one national or one ethnic dominance. It has a contempt for democracy, excuse me, and its insistence on obedience to a powerful leader. Well, that's our religion. The Christian faith is submission to a powerful leader who has temper tantrums and has anger management issues. And we call him God, and he could freak out on us and send a pandemic or a tsunami or cancer or AIDS or an earthquake, swallow up and tell us to dismember people or disembowel people, cut them off, kill the animals in the church. I mean, the Bible is full of that. And until we go back to the source of the anger and the vitriol and the victim consciousness and the idea that we need to get, that it's us against them, this situation is never going to change in this country. It feeds into fascism and it accepts a fascist leader because Donald Trump is so much like most people's experience of the God of the Bible who said, I repent that I made you. My spirit's not going to strive with you. You guys are mortals. Something's wrong with you. And then flooded the whole planet. So I'm going to the source, not just the symptoms of what's happening in our country. We need to rethink God, rethink good, rethink morality, rethink integrity, rethink customs and culture. So the fascist spirit is in Donald Trump. His people are expecting him to come back and stay in office for 12 more years, not 4, 12 more years. They believe in the QAnon. They believe in the pedophiles and that there's a cabal of Satan and occultists and witchcraft and people that practice occult practices. And there are some out there, I realize that. But this group is so paranoid by it, so that energy, now that's the 70 million that voted for him, their family and other sympathizers, it's in the deep sea rot of this country's twisted mind about God. And I know that sounds harsh and it sounds confrontive. It even sounds combative, and maybe it needs to be that way because we're fighting a demon, if you are a demagogue and demon God who is destroying our country. That mentality, I don't believe in that God that I'm describing to be my God, but that's a God that many religions, particularly Abrahamic faiths, embrace. And so it's gotten us in trouble. All these Jesus believers, Jesus saves signs, you know, the ichthus and the cross and all that stuff, the crusades and the onward Christian show, all of that is what we're dealing with or without Trump. And we're putting a lot of emphasis on Donald Trump, but that's Trump's America and that's America's Trump. So I see it that way. And we need to confront that repeatedly and consistently with purity and honesty and not just anger, though there's room for anger here. But I'm terribly disappointed and disillusioned what I've seen. And I think we need to address it in a way that people have to give answers and are be held responsible and accountable for what they've helped sponsor in this country for hundreds of years, not just recently.
Indeed, Bishop. Thank you so much. Bishop Tolton, will you bring Biggie into the conversation for us?
Absolutely. I've spoken of my frequent trips to Uganda, but I must tell my truth, which is I've never gone without a round trip ticket. Hallelujah, glory to God. And so my particular experience is different than others. And I'm so happy Biggie is here. We've worked together for the last 10 years, and she has really worked in the trenches, working with the LGBT community. And there's such an intimate connection between the ways in which President Museveni has stayed in power and the ways in which he has allowed the demonization and continued and even recent demonization of the LGBT community. And I'm looking forward to her telling us about her work as an LGBTQ advocate and the ways in which that work is really connected to the clamping down on democratic spaces in Uganda. Welcome, Biggie. So good to have you here. And I believe that as you're coming off of mute, you'll be able to then give some reflections on your experience having lived through the recent election between President Museveni and Bobi Wine.
Thank you. But
Biggie, are you able to hear us?
hope I've got your question well, but simply you want me to talk about as an LGBT advocate in Uganda. Yes, can you please repeat for me to be able to respond, because there's a delay in the connection, and
Sure, sure.
some words are
So,
skipped.
yes, so we were asking if you
Could you
could describe
please
to us your
repeat that?
experience as an activist, understanding that there's a connection between your work as an LGBT activist and the ways in which the government in Uganda has been able to stay in power. I think we have lost our dear sister for the moment. Dr. Brown, I'll just kind of speak to it as I can to some degree, but what we have experienced in Uganda, we have a church, TFAM Uganda, and of course we've been working with Sexual Minorities Uganda for years, and Julie can certainly speak to this. And in the last election cycle, when Bobby Wine gained such notoriety globally, in part because he's a former musician, and very much so due to the fact that he has a connection with young people. And I think that it is young people who globally are going to change things. It's young people that are marching in the streets in Russia right now, as Bishop Flunder has called them, the Black Lives Matter movement of Russia. And I think that that's well named. And Bobby Wine was a very popular figure. And so this time around, in trying to defeat him, Museveni just went whole hog in branding him as being the candidate that is being paid for and propped up by the West, and in particular by the LGBT community. And of course, this put particular pressure on LGBTQ activists there in Uganda. And so, Biggie, I was just talking a little bit about the experience of the community as there was this association made between Bobby Wine and the LGBT community in the West, and in particular, the funding stream coming out of the West. But you can see how, to some degree, clever that was for Museveni to create a boogeyman in the LGBT community and suggest that if Bobby Wine came to power, that in fact queer rights and of course gay marriage was going to be loose there in Uganda, in the same ways that Trump used the socialism card here in our country to scare people that all of a sudden we were going to become a socialist democracy here in the United States.
And be overrun by China.
Yes.
And immigrants at our border, our southern border, with all the hypocrisy associated with the fact that tons of them work for all of his hotels and all of his golf courses. But the process is the same. It is still the same. You have to create an enemy out of the person or the people or the country or whatever that you want to destroy. You have to make, how can you lynch a man after a Baptist service, Bishop Pearson, as we talked about religion? How can you go from singing Sweet Hour of Prayer, go outside and lynch a man, roast and lynch a man, and leave him hanging on a tree, and then eat chicken and watermelon? The only way that that can happen is if you have so fully vilified that individual that it seems that they are deserving of what it is that they're experiencing. Exactly. That Bishop Tolton just talked about, where Biggie is concerned, is precisely the process. And the same thing happened in the United States. They're killing babies. They are pedophiles, QAnon, pedophiles. What in the world are they talking about? Demon worshipers and pedophiles. What I want to say, look in the mirror. Okay, but I'll move on from that. I think that again, the heart of it is the same. It's your ability to abuse is directly proportionate to your ability to vilify and demonize who it is that you are abusing. And religion helps. Bishop Carlton Pearson is absolutely right. Are you back? Biggie, are you back?
Say it again.
She's reading the question.
And essentially the question is just a summary of the points that we've just made. So hopefully now, Biggie, you can respond.
Good.
Thank you for your patience, everyone.
While she's trying to find that, it's important to note that a lot of the attitude in Uganda is influenced by white evangelical American evangelists and missionaries who have poisoned their mind against the LGBT community and anything else that seems to be different from the culture that they embrace. And because Christians have influenced Africans for years and made them very conservative and very, very harsh, quote unquote, holiness people that denounce what they consider sin or those whom they consider sinners. That's part of the toxic mix that can bring violence. These are Christians that are gunning down and stabbing people and beating them in the streets of Uganda. They're doing it in the name of their God. That cannot be ignored. Absolutely. And our influence on that continent has taken, and I so admire her for being openly gay in a country that can legally lynch her. How she is protected every day is like angels around her, because over here would be a little bit different. Where she is, it's popular to abuse and attack, more popular than it is here. It is popular here too, but it is a mass mindset. So we are praying for you. Did you say Biggie? Is that what you call her? Well, you're a big lady. I tell you, you've got a big spirit and some broad lungs and a big brain and a big angel or two around you, or you'd be gone. And we're going to stand with you for sure. You are precious, precious, precious.
Thank you. Can somebody hear me? Can I submit?
We hear you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, and thanks for the compliment, Bishop. I was asked about the experience of LGBT person, especially during elections when we were related to Bobi Wine, and that's not new. So for quite a long time during the elections, we are a scapegoat in my country. And just recently, when the president said that Bobi Wine is funded by homosexuals outside the country, it's not news. We expected that because from the time Bobi Wine started his mission to run for presidency, there was a close relationship between him and perceived relationship between him and the LGBTI community. But I believe this is always an opportunity to cover up. It's easy to use the LGBT community because majority of Ugandans are homophobic. And when you talk about homosexuality in Uganda, you can just point at your opponent. If you're running for a position in Uganda, for you to beat your opponent, you can just use homosexuality. You just wake up and say he's gay or she's gay, and the whole Uganda will be on your side. You saw that very well when Stella Nyanzi lost the Kampala MP because she was contesting for MP, but she was also that was the major reason as to why all her opponents were against her, because she supports LGBT work in Uganda or LGBT persons in Uganda. So it was kind of scary to say that we fuel or support Bobi Wine to become president. Much as everyone has a right to their opinion, but that put most of us at risk. We all were worried because we didn't know what would happen after his statement. but good enough. Not a lot happened after his statement. A lot was not published in the media, and so it did not attract a lot of attention. But oftenly, that's what is used. We are scapegoats. Like there's a saying that when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So we are always, the LGBT community are the grass, and is the grass.
Wow.
So whenever there's misuse of funds in Uganda, something will come up on LGBT person, so to cover up. So we are the grass. But by the grace of God, we are still alive and good enough. Not so many of our people were attacked during this period of time. By the grace of God, we went through, and we are still going through the election process. Yeah.
Thank you, Biggie.
Hope I've answered that question.
Yes. Thank you so much. So I want to dig deeper if I can. And because we are talking about, and I heard what you said, Bishop Pearson, and I keep calling it Trump's America because we need to talk about what's actually happening right now with the Republican Party. And we know that the GOP largely sided against holding Trump impeachment trials. How could that be? And I guess the question is, what is it that Donald Trump has on the Republican Party, with the exception of 5 of them, that would make them say no to not having these impeachment trials? There is something going on, something more than we know, something that could be quite sinister. We don't know what it is, but I want to bring it to Bishop Flunder first.
Yeah. I have been asking myself this for several days because, I'm not a baby, and I have lived a long time and seen many different kinds of political struggles, locally, nationally, internationally, in church, out of church, in community, of all different colors and hues. But there are some similarities, I think, that could speak to some of our conversation tonight about this. One of them, as we were talking, I thought about the fact that when people start out a lot of time running for political office, they actually are running for the things that they really believe. To Bishop Pearson's statement about Pence, and the fact that, he's a grounded evangelical with some history, and wanting to stay true to his beliefs and trying to bend his politics as comfortably as he can to what he believes. And there are times I kind of like the man. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. We disagree around some things, but at least he has integrity about it, seemingly what he believes. I'd have to ask him about his choice of leaders, but that's a whole different conversation. But there's another thing when people begin a certain way and then you get twisted. How do you get twisted? You get twisted when you need the money. And the money, to get the money, it is sinfully true that it costs way too much money to run for public office in the United States. And most people do not have the money to do it. And they have to get the money from somewhere. And with money comes certain commitments. People have expectations of what it is that you're going to do with their money. Okay? And in the multiple millions of dollars, a lot of these people who have run for office are looking for money. What is attached to money? Opinions, ideas. What else is attached to money? Responsibility. And there are consequences if you cross the line that you crossed over to get the money. If you're not faithful to that, there are consequences that are associated with that. I think that has, in some ways, caused the Republicans and a lot of folks that think this way, it has cost them their own ideas of what is right and what is wrong. That I think they've turned into Stepford wives to some degree, to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's agenda, and to those who have the money and the influence. But now there's a huge conundrum because they have to try to figure out, who am I going to try to get? Is it the 70 million? Is it the Proud Boys? Is it QAnon? Is it the conservative Christians? Is it Donald Trump? Is it the multimillionaires? I just don't imagine what it must be to be them right now. And trying to figure out what I say on the news tomorrow. And have you watched in the last recent times that they've been on the news, they'll be in one place one time and then they shift in there in another place the next time, and they're really sure about something one time, and then they start talking out the side of their mouth about that thing. And so they're not certain in any place because it sort of depends on how it fits what their own needs are. Just the other day, McConnell said certain things about the impeachment trial. They went back and had a talk. They came back and they got a straw poll. We don't even know if the straw poll is really what they would vote for if it was a real poll. But the straw poll is having a certain political response based on what the current need is. So it's like they don't have an opinion. They don't have a soul. They wake up in the morning, they listen to the news, they get some political advice, and that's who they become on that day. You wake up tomorrow, you listen to the news, you get a little political advice from this one, then you backpedal. Then you don't have a soul. Politics has stolen the soul in many ways of many. I can trust the Pences, the Mitt Romneys a whole lot better in many ways than I can these folks that get up without a soul and then they listen to TV and get a soul on TV and go back out and talk about it. And that's where I think they are. Out of everybody right now in the world, this is the most confused pack of people I have ever seen in my whole life. But anyway, that's the Flunderism on it.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. I'm going to read this really quickly from Senator Spearman and then go to Julie. Says from Pat Spearman, the R's, which are the Republicans, are emboldened because they know their base will not abandon them. We have to give our social justice warriors in Congress the same assurance. They must know that we will show up at the poll when they fight for us at the municipal, state, and federal level. You are so right, Senator Spearman. Thank you so much for that. Julie?
You know, just building on what the various bishops have been saying so far, I think Pence and Pompeo and some of the other serious evangelical Christians who had the levers of power and knew how to work them a little better delivered a lot. And I think we have to not forget that. And they delivered an anti-abortion agenda. They delivered Christian nationalist judges. They on our side of the house, on the foreign affairs side, that love of, the Musevenis and the Putins of the world, was of Trump was numerous, right? Poland, Hungary, Egypt, Brazil, Indonesia. I mean, and they pulled those countries together in an alliance to fight gender, to fight LGBT, to fight, for the unborn child's human rights through, mechanisms and abuse of the concept of religious freedom in a really deep way that is not going away so fast. And I think we need to not forget, yes, there was Trump, but the people that he put into power actually did some real deep damage. And because they delivered, particularly on an anti-abortion Supreme Court and a pro-white Christianity in this country agenda, I think they have those voters pretty locked up.
Thank you so much, Julie. That makes a lot of sense. Bishop Tolton, then Bishop Pearson.
It was 12 years after Dr. King died that Ronald Reagan came to power. And there since slavery, I think there's been a relay race around matters of racial justice for African Americans. And I think that there's a clear connection and a handing off, an exchange of regard between Reagan and between Trump. I really see Trump as being Reagan's fruit coming up, but his fruit coming up in a way that I don't think was expectant of Reagan's more expectant successors like Pompeo and Pence and others. I think he's a far exaggerated version of the natural outcome of what Ronald Reagan, the seeds that he planted, starting his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, talking about welfare queens and demonizing the state. And this idea of deconstructing the state is not something that Steve Bannon came up with. This started with Ronald Reagan, de-toothing the power of the state and filling it with the idea of corporate interests. And that came to a peak and a head with Citizens United, where now corporations became people. So I think that this idea of shrinking the state to blow up the American corporation and its power and capital markets, and really the ways in which between 1980 and 2021, we now have a clear oligarchy in the United States of America. And I think that they're very interested in building out a global platform for a global oligarchy, which means that you've got to have minority rule. And so much of the work that they have done is really about how do we entrench and stabilize and fortify the idea of minority rule here in our country. And I'll end by saying, I said to a friend that I believe that in order to have voted for Trump, there is toxicity in every human being, but to vote for Trump, there is toxicity in him that you had to identify with in order to vote for him. There's a part of his agenda that you actually had to agree with. And he just made it okay to actually bring that agenda to the light. And it's cooked in and baked in, not just white supremacy. And I think Bishop Pearson and Flunder, we have to start calling this white Christian supremacy, because that is what it is. The religion is the glue. And I think we've really got to, as you all have articulated that, but I think in terms of it not just being able to be called white supremacy, but let's kind of put it in the face of white Christian evangelicals. This is white Christian supremacy. How could Billy Graham's son equate the people who stood up in the House to vote for impeachment as those who were the equivalents of Judas betraying Jesus? That is insane.
Right.
And the anti-Semitism of the QAnon conspiracy theory is like we've never seen before.
Yes.
And this idea of race and power described as God. Issues of racism and power mongering described as God is not new, but it has become a science in many, many, many ways. And to Bishop Pearson's earlier point, this is very connected with people's perceptions of reading the Judeo-Christian realities in the text, because that's the way that is written. Race and power, disguised as God, makes a certain people have power over, by divine order, power over another people. When that foundation is laid, you can kill somebody. I said you can roast them right after church, and it still is all right with God.
Yeah. I think the other thing before Bishop Pearson goes is that Bishop Tolton drew a parallel to Ronald Reagan in the 80s. And it's interesting that you did that, because I was just reading something that talked about Trump's coming into power and that it just didn't happen overnight, that he was actually being groomed by the KGB, by Russia for the last 40 years, that nobody was paying attention. They helped him. They helped him get those casinos in Atlantic City. That's Russian money in Atlantic City, and Russian money in Mar-a-Lago, and all of those places. I don't think that people have been following the stream as it relates to that has helped him to become who he is. The other thing I wanted to add was that Mike Pence being added to the equation was very important to them, because Mike Pence is the person that drew the white nationalist Christian people. It's Mike Pence. It was him. It was because of him. They put him in place because they thought that Donald Trump would not go rogue. Well, he did. He did go rogue on them. But at the end of the day, they also had
Pence's backup
there as a stopgap measure to relate to the white evangelical crowd. So, Bishop Pearson.
Well, excellent point. Excellent. All of you just had mouthfuls of truth, and I wish millions of people could hear it, though millions of people are already thinking what we're thinking. The situation with the GOP is not that they're Trump supporters. They want Trump's supporters. 74 million is gold. That's the largest amount. Joe Biden got the largest amount of votes of any president who's ever run for election. Trump got the second largest. These Republicans are not thinking about now. They're thinking about 2022 and 2024. And so they don't want to lose, whether that's Pence or Rubio or Cruz, any of those guys. They're all thinking about 2024 or 2022. They want those votes. Now, if Trump's followers and supporters were not, his numbers were not that high, they would literally impeach him and disempower him and get him out of the equation altogether. The Republican and Democratic senators would do that. But because of those votes, so we've got to find a way to pick the mind or study the mind of the people who put him in office. Now, I see a deterioration and a desolation and a demolition of that mindset. I think this is their last go around. They got their white knuckle grip on a country trying to hold on. And there are millions and millions of other Christians and non-Christians and more progressive Republicans out there who don't want to have anything to do with this ultra white rings conservative mentality. All my friends, black and or white, who are wealthy, have good things to say about Trump's influence on their pocketbook. Every one of them, even those who didn't vote for him and those who can't stand him, do say this, and that's black and white. And I'm talking about billionaires and millionaires. They're saying this man was good for my pocketbook, for my bank accounts, for my business in general. The poor man is usually the simple-minded Christian who are saying, well, he's standing for pro-life and God being ahead of our country, and if the ballots don't work, the bullets do, and so we got to have them both. And so that mentality is sticky and goozy and ooey, yucky, but it's there and it's powerful. It's shrinking, but it's still very, very influential. In the next 4 years, it's going to change. In the next 40 years, you may not even hear about that group with any significance. But right now, they are a major concern, and they will be in the next 2 elections. So until we can change their minds, and they don't seem to be changeable right now, there's some other revelations that are going to come forth probably between now and April that should stun and stagger all of our perceptions of democracy, the Republic of the United States of America, and the politicians that run it, and the outside sources and forces, spiritual wickedness in high and hidden places. They're sacred humanists out there, and they are sacred inhumanists out there. They're totally inhumane. They don't care who they hurt, who they kill, who they destroy, who they ruin. They want control of the economy and of the consciousness of the country. And they're people that don't all live in America. The Catholic Church has looked away, but you can tie a lot of the top things that happen in Italy, that are happening now, that have been happening with the Jesuit priesthood. And this is the first Jesuit Pope we've ever had. The Jesuits influenced Abraham Lincoln. They influenced Dr. King. They influenced Obama. And there's different wings in that group that are less conservative Christians and some that are very vicious. If you look at the commitments that these folks have and the covenants they've made, they don't care who they kill. They don't care who they hurt. And the Illuminati started in 1776, the same year we became an independent country. There's connections with all of that. This didn't just happen overnight. And it didn't just happen with Trump. This has been planned for decades. And Trump, Putin and those guys outside of our country with their occult, their rituals, their rites, their sacrifices, those people have fasted, they have prayed, they burnt whatever they need to burn, killed whoever they needed to kill, but they are connected to the success that they think they're getting, whether that's the New World Order or the Illuminati. And the church is their playground. That's what they're using. because that's where the most biased, bigoted, jaded mindset is. Putin's opening up religion in Russia again because he realizes how powerful religion can be. He'll let them have a Coptic church as long as he controls it. The Queen of England controls the Anglican Church, which has competed with Catholicism. And so Winston Churchill said when they discussed the possibility of aliens with President Eisenhower, he said, let's keep this quiet for at least 50 years because it'll destroy our democracy and it will hurt the church. Winston Churchill said that. So these people are not as dumb as we think, the leaders. And they know that their bosses are the masses who vote them in and vote them out. Somebody made reference to money, the large money behind all that. They own the person in office. The one who's writing the checks, he who holds the bag, pulls the strings. And so wealthy people are out there. And I've been among them. I've traveled on those conservative. You mentioned Ronald Reagan, Bishop Tolton. That's when I became a Republican. When he said, and I was hanging around with James Robinson, some of the very conservative Christians at that time, anti-everything, big pro-life guy. And when he said, I can't help, you can't help me, but I can help you, I thought, we got a friend in the White House. That's when I shifted until Obama ran. Then I came back to the Democratic Party, which my family has been in. And Oral Roberts voted for Obama and would have voted the second time, but he was dying. So there's a lot of collisions here and a toxic mixture that's going to be explosive. And when the dust is all settled, this will be a rebirth and reborn country.
Thank you, Bishop. I want to try to bring Biggie back into the conversation. Biggie, if you can see the chat, we have a question for you. And the question is, what is the answer for a liberated Uganda in the future?
Great question. She didn't hear you, evidently.
What is the answer for a liberated Uganda? She heard me.
Thank you. A liberated Uganda would look like a country that respects the human rights of all its. The answer is simple. It is just to respect the human rights of all our citizens, regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity, but also in terms of a Uganda that is liberated will have men and women of God standing up against injustices and dehumanization of the citizen of Uganda. And for me, I believe that will be liberated Uganda. Because you see in the current elections and what has been happening, so much has been happening, so many people have been killed, and we've seen less of the so-called men of God saying nothing about what is happening and all the injustices that are happening, the corruption that is happening in the country is not talked about by the men and women of God. But just imagine if it was a story on homosexuality in Uganda, you would see every man and woman of God come out to speak against that. But on obvious issues where human rights are disrespected and degradation of Ugandan's citizens, they are not speaking up. So for me, a liberated Uganda is that one where human rights of every citizen is respected and all the freedoms of the citizen of Uganda are respected. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Biggie, for that. We appreciate that. I want to first say something. Denise Robinson made a statement. She said, the growth of Christianity is being supported in Russia by the family. We know who that is. They host a prayer breakfast there to promote their kind of Christianity that is based on the Gospels, Jesus and nothing else. So, of course, I mean, that's not surprising to know that the family is yet involved in something else. Sure.
There's a counter. Well, it's not so much a counter. It is, I think, also important that we acknowledge the fact that the President of the United States and this rainbow coalition of leaders that have come into power in the United States, while we are in our struggle again, or continually, with Donald Trump and Donald's ilk and the hold that he has on the Republican Party, there are things that are shifting and changing that we have very little time and tendency to celebrate. And that's primarily because the whole idea of the previous administration is to keep themselves on our minds and in our faces. That was more important than the epidemic. It was more important in the way that we were perceived in the Paris Accords, and more important in the ways that we are seen in the Arab world. More important than anything was that their issues and policies and politics would be tantamount. But here's what my heart says. This is one of the reasons why I really celebrate President Biden, because the swirling that's going on around his head and around ours, because we have been attacked and demoralized and beat up for the last 4 years and the months leading up to that time, right? That is still the principal taste that's in our mouths. But what I feel in many ways pushed to do is to remember what the executive orders have been. To remember that some of them have gone all the way through without being opposed, while all this kaflama and fluxing is going on. And those are things like the transgenders in the military. There's so much that I could say about how much there was a fight about, went on for months about transgender folks in the military, and with a pen stroke. A pen stroke.
Damn.
All of a sudden, things, and you do a bifecta, not a trifecta, it's a bifecta, where the president signs it, and then the person who's in charge of the military, who is also a person of color and of justice, says, show you right. When that kind of thing begins to happen, it is hard to even celebrate those realities, because the Trumpites and the Trump Republicans are sucking up all of our air. So I would encourage all of us to take a really good look at the outcomes of the executive decisions that have been made and executive orders that have been reversed, and at the rollout as it relates to the pandemic. We've got to take a good look at the fact that it was even worse than what we thought in terms of no teeth. But Dr. Fauci and Dr. Briggs have said recently, now that they can really tell the truth about what was happening, there was no plan. There was no plan. And 400,000 plus, 400,000 plus, nearly getting closer to 500,000 plus is genocide.
Yes, it is.
There's no pretty way to say it in any other way. No plan. It was genocide.
Yeah.
And my heart says that we have a reversal in a number of things. And those are the things that we also should balance all of this, keeping our minds stuck on this man, and not really being able to rejoice in the fact that some things, while all of this is going on, are shifting and changing for us.
Yeah. I want to say, there are two questions that I know that I want to bring to you all. Some of the questions that are in our chat are repetitive. They're just framed differently. So I'm going to take this one from Reverend Dr. Rochelle Carr. She says, how do we deal with the capitulation of Black churches, pastors, and congregations that still stand with the injustices of Trump's America? And she describes Trump's America as evangelical supremacy, white nationalists, and support the dehumanization and degradations of their own community. Bishop Tolton.
It's a great question.
Mhm.
And I think it goes back to something that Biggie said, and as she talked about what could ignite a move toward a liberated Uganda. One of the things she clearly stated was men and women of God standing up and speaking the truth. And Bishop Flunder and Bishop Pearson have both spoken to this. But I think that at the heart of what we're dealing with is a deep spiritual crisis that is grounded in the unfortunate sense of our understanding of God. Our God view informs our worldview. And I think it goes back to, the Jewish mythology of the story in Genesis in the creation. When Adam and Eve had that moment after the fall, the first thing they did was dress themselves because they realized that they were different. And this idea of their othering became something that was new for them, because beforehand they were just one being. We understand God to be God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They are co-equal in their triune relationship, and so were Adam and Eve. After the fall, they saw themselves as different. And the scripture talks about your desire will be for your husband. That's not about erotic desire, but it's actually a desire that is around being competitive and a desire to rule over. And I deeply believe that that othering and the gender-based conflict that happened in the garden is the ground upon which the imperial desire to manipulate and dominate and control the other has been played out over and over again. And until we revisit our God view, and until we refine the Ruha and find her and find she, and until we're able to embrace the feminine, we will no longer seek to dominate and to control and to abuse the feminine. But it has to start with an open spiritual inquiry. And I think it's really all about, can we find her and reverse our God view and heal our understanding of her and him, so that we can then heal our understanding of our complex selves.
Thank you, Bishop Tolton. Bishop Flunder and Bishop Pearson, do you have something to add to that question?
Well, we were colonized by this kind of theology. Then we have to understand that. And we have to keep reminding ourselves that this theology, the manifest destiny-based theology, as I say sometimes, if I have the gun and you have the knife, God intends for me to rule over you. That whole concept, in some way, we do get it from religion, but we did not come to the United States because we wanted to take a trip. We came to the United States as chattel, and part of being chattel was to be given a religion that would calm us down and dumb us down and help us to understand that the divine required that we have this power over dynamic reality. Now, that the fact that when we want to have power, that we visit that our own people, is because we do consider it power and we consider it right to do it. There is an unlearning to do. Bishop Pearson has said it many, many times. I've watched him do it. And it's painful to unlearn multiple generations of bad religion, violent religion, hateful religion, such that we will be, I've said it, just one other thing I'll say, I've said it before. If all of my life, Julie, if all of my life, I believe that this is bad hair and what you have is good hair, and what I have to do is figure out some kind of way to get this bad hair of mine to look like your hair. I have to do all sorts of things to this to make it do that. Now, it is doable. It's just not permanent. It doesn't last. Do you understand what I'm saying? In a little while, the part that really is me will grow out and supersede. And in the COVID, it really happens. It grows out and it supersedes what it is that you have, because that is not who I am. That didn't come from people who have those realities. Why am I saying this? Because we have to disavow, dispossess our own taking of and believing in a theology that diminishes and distorts and destroys and demeans Or what we will do is continue to embrace the theology of the oppressor, because in that moment, it makes us feel strong. That's the piece that has to shift and it has to change. And we got to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And we may have to die and leave it to the young people that are coming after us before it actually literally does change. Yes.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. Bishop Pearson.
If in fact Donald Trump lost the election, even though he thinks he won it by a landslide, and so do many of his followers, millions actually, if in fact he lost it because of the pandemic. He would have won with landslide success, possibly, but his handling of the pandemic crippled him. It was self-sabotage in many ways. But you got to understand why his attitude toward that. In biblical Judeo-Christian thinking, plagues and pandemoniums are sent of God or by God. The only group, any religion that talks about plagues and natural disasters and biblical proportion and acts of God are Western Christians who believe that God would actually commit genocide, as Bishop Flunder alluded to, that God would kill millions, and God does send floods and sends plagues and sends famines. And so the mentality is, this thing is sent of God. If we fight it, we're fighting God. God is judging America for mistreating Donald Trump, our Messiah, our conservative biblical value interest leader. So they're twisted in their thinking, and it's all around this ideology idea that God does terrible things when he's angered or when he's wrathful. So the plague is a sign of the wrath of God, but they can't reconcile that with the wrath of God causing their Messiah, Donald Trump, to lose control of the country, which leaves them a people without one. They may not verbalize it that way. The biggest arguments right now in this country are happening around Christian tables, dining room tables, and conference rooms where leaders and bishops are trying to figure out, how did the prophets or prophecy go wrong? How can we clean up this mess? Should we just ignore all of that and literally, physically, forcefully go and take over the government as they attempted to on January 6th and thought something else was going to happen on January 20th, and some are still thinking something's going to happen next month? So we got a mentality that's connected to a religious bigotry and a cult mentality that is rancid and rapid and pandemic and endemic in America and most of the Western world, but particular in America. Now they're losing their grip, and they're losing their grounds, and they're losing their crown, and they're having a public breakdown. They're freaking out. And so the COVID pandemic feeds into the toxicity of the tension around our country right now. We view it differently. Most of the red states don't wear a mask. They believe the whole thing is a hoax. Oklahoma is one of those states. We have the highest COVID per capita positives in the earth, the fourth in the whole earth. Oklahoma, huge red state, red soil, red soul, and rednecks run this state. And our politicians in Washington are strong, redneck, racist bigots. Not all of them, but most of them. All the GOP, they've used that name, as Biggie made reference to, if the politicians in Uganda running for office, if they invoke the term of anti-gay, then that automatically gives them an up. If in this state they use the term pro-life or God bless you or Trump, they're in. Doesn't matter what the race and party. If they use those terms, they're in. So we're dealing with a cult mentality of brainwashing that is also a serious, serious condition of the mental culture and character of our country right now. We have to deal with that at some point. And little by little, we just have to keep confronting it and at some point combat it.
Thank you, Bishop. Julie, I have a particular question for you. It's from Cheryl Nolden. Says, wouldn't you say there's a bigger, powerful machine using 45 Republican senators from voting against conviction of Trump? I think it's much bigger than his base.
Well, You know, we've been talking just this last period, you know, the thing that keeps me hopeful and looking forward is that there were still over 90 million people in this country who did not vote, right? Like, that's a lot of people. And who did ultimately save our democracy on the last election? It was Black voters in major cities, right? It was Milwaukee, it was Philly, it was Detroit. We really have to urgently focus on some practical braces to our democracy and fixes to those problems, right? We've been talking about, you talked about Citizens United. I mean, we have to get behind DC statehood. We have to pass these voting rights bills and make election day a holiday, and just pick one or two of these fixes and urgently get behind it, to make it possible to undo what is so deeply wrong with the Republican versus Democratic split and dysfunction in Washington. The filibuster, the Electoral College. I mean, you name it. We have a lot of things that we could get behind, and if we could just move a few in this next 2-year period, we would do a lot to save this democracy, and we'd be having a different conversation, I think, about the GOP. That's the best I got.
That's good. Thank you very much for that. I want to move. This is the last question, which is going to be for all of you that want to weigh in on it. And this is from L. Stanley Davis. He says, how do we treat the mindset of the gullible, which is something that Bishop Pearson was just talking about, and so easily swayed populists who, like those of Jonestown, drank the Trump Kool-Aid, which is what Bishop talked about, and digested a steady diet of his hatred, scare tactics, and total disrespect for his fellow Americans? Is there a balm in Gilead for this 77 million populace who supported and still supports this modern day student and want to be Adolf Hitler of our times? What's the cure for this sickness and disease of this populace? And anyone can go first.
I'm not a violent person, but I would change the word balm with bomb. B-O-M.
Is there a bomb?
Bomb them. I don't mean literally bomb them, but
no, I know
that you need to bomb that mentality.
Yes.
Of false piety and Christian loyalty, and Jesus wants to save America from the liberals and the gays and the pro-abortionists and the pro-choice and the progressives, and let's just standing on the word of God. That whole gooey thing that I lived around for 50 years. And I promise you, long before I started preaching inclusion, you need to believe me when I tell you this, Bishop Flunder, I was sick of it. I mean, I felt that sticky mess for years walking among these people, black and white. There's just a sticky, gooey thing about that. It's really repulsive to me. And I see it more definitively today, and we have to call it out. The church must be held accountable and responsible for their participation in the chaos in this country right now, in their selection of a public heathen, a paganistic heathen, fascist, bigoted, homophobic, arrogant, misogynist creep. I mean, this guy is yucky. And so he doesn't want political correction and doesn't use it, so I'm not using it tonight. A lot of his supporters love this whole let's just get done. One of the first things Donald Trump said is we need to dispense with this political correctness thing. I do award him for. He does say what he means. He speaks. If he don't like it, he says it. He doesn't play the Pence game. He gets in your face. He'll show his butt and tell you to kiss it or try to kick it. I mean, he don't care. So we've not had that kind of rugged, raw, rare, reckless, obnoxious leader in our culture, in our country's history. We're dealing with a different demon god, I'm calling it. And we have to deal with it spiritually, prayerfully, and scripturally, if you believe in the scriptures the way most of us do. There's a way to handle this, but we need to be very confronted. Jesus turned over tables. He used whips. He said, this has got to stop. And he did that only in the temple, only with the church. He did not display that anger except toward religious, Pharisaic, self-righteous bigots. And we need to do the same thing today.
Let me put my amen on that. Okay. This is the bomb part. Here's what I want to say. Dr. Pamela Lightsey from Meadville Lombard, she's the dean at Meadville Lombard Seminary, preached for us Sunday. And I'd like to say to you what was in many ways the essence of what I heard in her sermon. She was talking, as you were, Bishop Pearson, about Jesus spending time in the temple and watching the process of religion happening in the temple, and that he was chagrined and angry with what was happening on that day. And it was Jesus that was there who was having problems with religion. There were the priests who were offering the sacrifice. There were the people who were giving or bringing sacrifice to the lambs and the doves and the pigeons that they had purchased. And then there were the hucksters, the people who were selling to the people the things that they were giving sacrifice. And she asked us a question. She said, lay the whole thing out and answer this question. Why are you there? Essentially, how do you identify in the crew? Because they were all in the same place, but they were in the place for a different reason. Good. And I have found that to be true about religion. We can all be in the same assembly, all in the same place,
different reasons,
all at the same meeting, but there for a different reason. And let's go make it even broader. In this country, all talking about religion, all talking about God. But like that little story about the Hindu priests that put their hand on an elephant and they were all blind. Yeah. And all of them thought it was one thing different from what the other ones, because neither of them could see it in its totality. Mm-hmm. I think that to some degree, we have to ask ourselves first, why are we here? Why are we involved at all in the conversation, the theopolitical conversation? And then I think we have to begin to ask those that we lead, why are you here? Why do we do this work? What is motivating us? That is, I think, the quintessential essence of what we need to come out of this COVID doing and what we need to begin while we're in it. And then, of course, I think we need to look to our young people. I'll say it again, because there are some things that won't change until they die out. But if we look to our young people and we do the hard work that Julie lifted up a minute ago to encourage people who have thought that their votes don't matter, encourage them to get in the political process. I want to thank Donald Trump for teaching us more about the Electoral College than we ever knew before by virtue of what he did. We know more than we ever knew before. And so it is across the spectrum. We need to be aware, we need to be prepared, and we need to prepare the generation that is coming after us. And as faith leaders, we need to ask ourselves the question, why am I here? And ask it of everyone who is around us that is involved in this work. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Bishop.
Good word.
Anyone else?
Amen. Amen. I would just add to that I deeply believe that as Congresswoman Barbara Lee wants to lead a truth and reconciliation initiative, that is desperately needed in our country. I believe that love ultimately is the answer. But one of the things that's been percolating in my spirit the last couple of weeks is that from an African-American perspective, that there is a release of the burden that I think we must experience, in that white Christians are going to have to save themselves here. And I think that we have to hold them responsible. And I'm really praying for what happened in the 1860s. It was an abolitionist movement that broke open the United Methodist Church, a movement that was clear about the need for full equity 100 years before the end of Jim Crow. I am praying that a school of prophets rise out of the white Christian experience that will speak truth to power and lead a modern day revivalist social justice movement.
Yes, yes.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Bishop Tolton. Julie and Biggie, do you all have any last words?
I'm just going to say amen to all of that.
Very good. And Biggie, can you hear us? Do you have any last words you want to leave with us?
I just want to say I thank God for the American people for voting into office Joe Biden, and because that has an effect to what is happening in Uganda. Before, when Trump became the president of United States, we all got so worried. And can you imagine, there are so many evangelicals in Uganda who are praying and fasting for Trump to be re-elected into office, which really worried me. And I am happy that God answered our prayers. And peace and love to everyone. That's my last word. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What can we do to help her? Is there something we can do tonight? Make a donation or something for the work in Uganda, because it's got to be critical. And if I'm out of my place, I apologize.
No, you're fine. Bishop Tolton, you want to speak?
Absolutely. We would love to have those that are watching us today contribute to the work that we do at TFAM Global, and we will make sure that that money goes directly to Farouk. You can log on to tfamglobal.org. You can also log on to the City of Refuge, because there you can give to the YA Flunder Foundation, which is the not-for-profit that covers the work of TFAM Global. We'd be so glad to bless Farouk. Thank you, Bishop Pearson, for that opening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you. Biggie, thank you especially for being up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to talk to us. We appreciate that. Knowing that the power went out, knowing that the internet it's not as best, but you still persevere with us. We are grateful for your presence, and we are praying for you and your work in Uganda. Thank you, Julie, for being with us. We appreciate it. At the last minute, you came through. It was very important that you were here tonight, and so we're grateful. Thank you, Bishop Tolton, for being with us as well. Also at the last minute, we appreciate it. And Bishop Pearson and Bishop Flunder, as always, you make the conversation go well, and we're so appreciative of both of you tonight. We're going to start off with, we're going to have some announcements, and Bishop Flunder is going to come first. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. And I want to pick up where Bishop Tolton left off and encourage you. We've been a long time now doing this work on the Gatekeepers. And I want to say to our audience that we very much intend to seed into the work that God has given us to do. I have found oftentimes people who hate are often more generous than people who love. And I want to encourage us, those of us who have been blessed by Beyond the Gatekeepers, I think it is time for us to support these broadcasts by sending a donation via Cash App to $TFAM Annual, $TFAM Annual. And you can also give through PayPal. You have seen that online when we've been together, but you can give to the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries using PayPal. And there is an opportunity to expand and broaden what it is that we do. We've been together since May.
Yes.
We've been together a goodly long time. And we've been together every week, with the exception of just a couple of times that we were out because of things that conflicted with our time together. I want to encourage you, start giving, start putting your funds, your money, your support around the things that really are moving us from just being borderline participants to being people who are definitively change agents. Where our money is, that is often where our heart really is. Please contribute. We can take better care. We can expand and grow. We can have an even greater online presence if you will support. We can help our projects and programs and ministries throughout the United States and across the world if you can give. Give what you can. Give it generously and give it with a heart that is set upon change and set upon love. God bless you today. We love you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder, for that. We have some more announcements coming your way. We want you to make sure that you go to the Healing Place Apothecary. It is owned by and founded by Nubian Flunder. She is the daughter of our bishop. And if you go to www.thehealingplace, that's thpapothecary.com. That's www.thehealingplace@apothecary.com. thpapothecary.com. thehealingplaceapothecary.com. Please support this business. If you want to advertise with Gatekeepers, please go to beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. And also, if you need any kind of remote production and video conferencing, administration, or tech support, you want Cara Solutions, which is owned and operated and founded by Susan A. Webley. Focus on your passion and let Cara handle the rest. Let Cara do the heavy lifting so that you can focus on your event. She does custom branding, promo graphics, overlays, intro, outro videos, presentations. She does show development, planning, guest engagement, etc. She does training on Zoom, StreamYard, Restream, and more. For more information on her wide range of services, please visit www.kara-solutions.com. Thank you so much. And again, as Bishop Flunder said, we thank you for joining us. Please continue to support this and future broadcasts by sending a donation via Cash App to $TFAM Annual. Tonight, our credits, intro and outro, Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology, was the instrumental version by The Hit Company. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. God bless you.